What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with 444, and we are talking running back trade targets for week 5. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe. And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 444.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. An exclusive for our YouTube audience. Use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%. Now let's go ahead and dive right in with my first running back, Rachaad White. This trade target might feel a bit underwhelming, and I totally get that. It is a low-cost trade targeting a RB2. General sentiment around Rachaad White is just kind of middle of the road. People can acknowledge that he's the lead back, but at the same time, his yards per carry aren't inspiring. He does need a touchdown to have a strong fantasy performance because a 100-yard game just really doesn't seem like it's in the cards for him very often. But here's the facts. He has had a minimum of 14 carries in every single game this season, and he sees receiving work every single game as well, and he's been decently productive with it. I think White is locked into the role and solid, and if you are looking for a player to add depth, he's a very good value buy. Do be aware that he has a bye week, so you won't be using him, but this can be used as leverage if a team is desperate for a win this week and needs a running back and needs a trade to help them through this bye week. The next running back that I want to talk about is Travis Etienne. This is definitely not a buy low because his overall performance has been strong, but this is an opportunity to sneak in and maybe grab Etienne below cost, slightly below cost, because the Jags offense has been very underwhelming, but Etienne has been the consistent bright spot for them. Despite the fear of Tank Bigsby eating into this workload for him, Etienne has had very solid workload and his receiving upside has been higher than expected. He's had a minimum of 18 carries in every single game outside of that week 2 Kansas City matchup, which is understandable. We know how that goes against Kansas City. But heading into the season, my concerns around Etienne weren't really focused on Bigsby, but around the lack of receiving upside. This year, he's already had 2 games with 5 targets, and he had 2 games with 5 targets across the entire season last year. He is succeeding, despite the Jags being generally bad. The only issue with Etienne is that the Jags' running back strength of schedule is ugly, but that's less of an issue for a back that has strong volume and receiving upside. In games against teams like Buffalo and New Orleans, you're probably going to see him looking at that 10 to 14 fantasy point range. In games like Pittsburgh or Houston, you'll have those nice ceiling games. Etienne is a solid high-end RB2 with true top 10 upside. We're going to talk about another potentially controversial trade running back, but hear me out on this one, Jerome Ford. Considering that someone spent their entire fab more than likely to get him, this could be a difficult task, but it is worth a try because I'm already hearing rumblings of fantasy managers all over the place ready to bail out on Ford for the cheap. The Browns are on a bye week, and if Jerome Ford's manager in your league has a team that is just won maybe 1 or 2 games and is low on running backs, they could be willing to part with Ford at a very reasonable price. Ford's yards per carry in weeks 3 and 4 were bad. There's no denying that. His week 3 performance was saved by touchdowns. His week 4 performance was saved-ish by receptions. But week 3 was literally the worst matchup that a running back can get. And week 4 was a horrible, horrible situation where the Browns were without Deshaun Watson and Dorian Thompson-Robinson had to fill in last minute and the entire offense was a mess. No one thrived. So I'm giving him a pass on that. But if you're a strong team with depth and you can sit him for a couple of weeks, the matchups ease up and there's opportunity for Ford to shine. I do not believe that Kareem Hunt is a true threat to Ford's workload. Ford should retain the lead back role through the season and is worth trading for on the very, very cheap for managers willing to literally throw him away, and you can stash him for the long term. The next running back that I want to talk about is Joe Mixon. The Bengals are in a tough position as a whole. Joe Burrow is struggling and the offense just looks uninspiring. Mixon is underperforming from where he was drafted, and for that reason, combined with the Bengals' offensive struggles, Mixon is an interesting buy low candidate. He's not massively underperforming. This was the first week where he failed to hit double-digit fantasy points, and against the Titans, that is very understandable. The floor has been safe, but the ceiling just hasn't really been there, and that was my primary concern for Mixon heading into the season. He's a lead back with very limited ceiling. And that just wasn't really a good fit for the players being drafted around him. That said, I would totally trade for him now at a discounted rate because a lead back is a lead back. I'm not drafting him as an RB1. I am trading for him as an RB2 in a bad offense. And we will wrap things up with Breece Hall. Breece Hall has been on this list, but we're going to circle back to him one more time because fantasy managers are continuing to be frustrated with the lack of usage for Hall. He's seeing less than 50% of snaps, And even on a limited basis, the touches just aren't where they should be. But the Jets have had a brutal start to the season in terms of the opponents they've faced. Buffalo, Dallas, New England, Kansas City. That is just flat out unfair. I brought Hall back onto the list for one very specific reason for this week in particular. This is the last time you will be able to acquire him on the cheap. Do it now. The Jets face Denver this week. That is the most ideal fantasy matchup for opposing running backs. Last week, we saw Khalil Herbert, who had failed to surpass 35 rushing yards, suddenly break out for 103 rushing yards and a receiving touchdown. Denver's defense is awful. Take advantage of it and swoop in there and grab him now, because the value is going to rise for Hall after this week. Even on a 50% snap count, Hall will look like a rock star. The rest of the season schedule is actually very running back friendly. They've got all the big tough ones out early, and it gets a lot easier. As Hall gets more touches, he'll be able to take advantage of these opportunities, and against lesser competition, he should have a strong back half of the season. That is it. That wraps things up for this video. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure that you like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Are you in on targeting these guys? Who are you targeting this week in trades? And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 4for4.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. And exclusive for our YouTube audience, use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%.